home reset ended up being an interesting one for me. Most of my observations and realizations were expected, but one thing did come up that surprised me, and I will go into all the details in this video. I've used this month's theme before when I was doing the Artist's Way, but I loved how it turned out so much that I knew immediately that I wanted to use it for the home chapter. Here is the title page. This is chapter 6 of my book, Authenblissity Reset, and this is, of course, the home chapter. The quote that I chose is by Maya Angelou, and it reads, "The ache for home lives in all of us, the safe place where we can go as we are and not be questioned." On the next page, we have the list of exercises, and as you can see, I completed all of the exercises in all of the sections, except for the Explore section, where you're asked to choose 2 or 3 exercises out of 10, and I ended up choosing 2 exercises. In the home chapter, I decided to do the Changes exercise and the Wandering exercise, and I'll talk about those more when we get to that section. There are 3 exercises in the Arrive section, and I did do them all, although I felt a lot of resistance this month to the reaction exercise, and I almost skipped it, but I decided to go ahead and listen to the recording and see what would come up, and I thought if I really didn't want to do it, if I was feeling really cringy and just really weird about it, I would turn it off. But as I heard myself reading the personal story, I did have a few things that came up for me, so I went ahead and jotted those down. There isn't anything too groundbreaking in here. They are all things that I've thought about before, but at the end, I wrote something down that I haven't really expressed a whole lot. I feel this inside, but I don't often let it surface, and that is that buying this home was a major decision that I got right, and it's a huge contributor to my current lifestyle. I loved my word cloud this month. I decided to do a little floor plan, and floor plans are something that I used to draw as a child, very similar to this one. I also built something like this out of Lego before, so I really like kind of like the top-down view of a home and seeing where all the rooms are, the bathroom, the kitchen, etc. This is a floor plan that I just made up in my head, and in each area of the home I jotted down words that came up for me when I looked at the space. So things like safety when you come in the front door, relief around the bathroom area, nourishment in the kitchen and dining area, so on and so forth. This was kind of a neat way for me to think about my own home differently, the different areas of my home, and what type of satisfaction I derive from each area, so I really loved the way the word cloud turned out. The pendulum exercise was interesting because I realized that I do think a lot about home, and I'm interested in the topic in terms of the sense of home and the intangible things that it brings to my life. So things like safety, security, comfort, a sense of belonging, and that sort of thing. But I'm not really that interested in making my home look nicer. So in terms of like the physical space itself, I don't really care about renovations or decorating. It doesn't bother me to have a home that is not magazine worthy or Instagram worthy. So I thought that was a really interesting contrast, that I do care about home in the sense that home is very important to me, but I care more about how I feel in my home versus what my home looks like, and especially how it's perceived by other people. I really don't care that much about that. Next, we're moving into the Observe section, and I observed myself for not 7 days this time, but 8 days. The reason for this was twofold. The first being that I did these quadrants in my bullet journal, and there was an empty one at the end. I could have drawn something there, or maybe I could have started patterns there, but I decided to do a day 8 because on day 8, I actually had something come up for me that I wanted to jot down. One of the things that I noticed when I did this week of self-observation was that I don't really feel anything frustrating about my home. There are things that need to be fixed or that could be spruced up. I really don't feel a sense of urgency around these items, and I definitely don't feel frustrated about these items. The one exception did happen on day 8, and I was taking a shower and I was just like so annoyed by my shower curtain liner. I really love our little shower curtain rings. They've been very durable. They work really well for the most part, and I like that I can wash them. But because they are a C shape and there's a big gap, my shower curtain liner comes off in a bunch of different places. It never comes comes off completely, but it bothers me that it comes off of certain rings and I constantly have to fix it. And I'm pretty short, so I do have to reach up to fix it. That bothered me on day 8, and I was thinking about it as I was showering. And I think because I was doing the home chapter, I actually came up with a solution. I considered buying new shower curtain rings, but I really didn't want to. I've tried metal ones before that kind of like snap shut, and I considered buying plastic ones that close a little bit more, but I read that some of them snap when you're trying to put it on the rod. I also don't like to waste stuff. I like to use what I have, and I don't like to contribute to landfill. So I thought about it some more, and there was such a simple solution. I have these little binder clips that I use for a ton of different things, and I have a lot of them. And so I put those on the shower curtain rings to secure the liner, and it works perfectly. It was the easiest solution, no cost, no waste. I used what I had, and oh, I feel so good about that. I already talked about one of the main things that I noticed when I did my week of self-observation, but I've got a few more patterns that I noticed, all pretty minor things. I was really excited to do the changes exercise because I wanted to make a list of things that I wanted to improve about my home, but I couldn't think of too many things. Thankfully, this exercise only asks for 3 things, and I was able to think of 3, so I jotted them down here, but none of them are really urgent. None of them are really necessities. Eventually, hubby and I will get around to doing these things. So this is replacing our window coverings, replacing our microwave, but probably with a range hood, and replacing or reupholstering our bar stools. The next exercise is wandering, which involves making a list of 10 places you'd like to visit. These places can be big or small. It could be in your neighborhood, it could be across town, it could be across the ocean. I really wanted to do this exercise because in March I started a practice called solo dates, where I basically take myself on a date somewhere. I can do whatever I feel like doing. I can do something relaxing or creative or adventurous. So I wanted to think of a few more ideas for solo dates, which is why I picked the wandering exercise. Most of these things are things that I can do on my own. For example, going to a cafe or a quiet lobby to read or work, a day trip to Center Island, and that sort of thing. I also thought of some weekend getaways that I could do on my own or with hubby. And as I was thinking of places, I also jotted down taking a trip to Australia to visit my sister and taking another trip to the East Coast with hubby and Lulu. Those are things that I would love to do sometime in the future, but again, there's no urgency. I'm really glad I have this list now because I know solo dates are something I want to do and want to make time for, but time goes by so quickly, and already in April, I think I may not be able to squeeze in a full solo date as I intended. But I do have this list here. When the desire strikes, I can go ahead and take a look at the list and pick something out that feels really good to me. Next up, we're moving into the connect section, and this is the most difficult section of the book. The memories exercise, though, was pretty fun for me. I decided to do this map of places that I've lived up to my current home, and the dots represent all of the different addresses that I've had, although some of them are a little fuzzy, so I don't know if I've understated or overstated the dots, but this is as much as I could remember, and it was neat to see the progression of being born in Toronto, leaving to go somewhere else, coming back to Toronto, leaving again, coming back to Toronto, leaving again. And when I say Toronto, I mean downtown Toronto, so I've spent the majority of my life in downtown Toronto. Disentangling is where the surprises started to come up for me. Because I've done the exercises in this book so many times, sometimes by the time I get to disentangling, I kind of already know or have a sense of what I might discover about myself. But this time I really had no idea, so I just worked through it. What came up for me stems from how content and at peace I feel about home right now. Whenever I get to this state of feeling really good about something, there's a fear that starts to come up, and the fear is around not being in this place anymore or losing this state of contentment. This is essentially a fear of losing my home, whether it be losing it in a physical sense. For example, something happens to my home like a natural disaster or a fire or a flood or that sort of thing. But I'm also really scared, and this is probably the majority of the fear, is that I change my mind about my home. Something happens, for example, to the neighborhood perhaps, where I don't feel comfortable in my home anymore. The home is still there, it's still the same, but I've changed. I want something different. So that is also something that I'm afraid of, because I know I am an ever-changing human. I can see myself in a place down the road where I want something different, and that really scares me. So this was a really interesting aspect of home that came up for me that I wasn't really expecting, but I have had this fear for a while. I just don't think I recognized it as an issue. And during the disentangling exercise, I noticed how much that fear affects my enjoyment of my home in the present. So I am going to try to let that go, just enjoy my home while I still enjoy it, knowing that I might change in the future or I might want to live somewhere else in the future. I don't want to be attached to my home in the physical sense, because I know I can build a home anywhere in terms of having a sense of home. That depends more on me being content and at peace and with people that I care about. I want to loosen my attachment to my physical home, the neighborhood, and that sort of thing. Next, we come to perceptions and perspective. And where my inner critic is really vocal right now is around the time that I'm taking to fix things that need to be fixed. My inner critic tries to tell me that it's because I'm not working full time and I'm too frugal to spend money on my home. But my inner best friend reminds me that I've kind of always been this way. I just don't feel that urgency. I also really like to make do with what I have and not have additional waste due to consumerism. I have been in that consumerism rabbit hole in the past and it didn't feel good. This feels much more aligned to me, trying to limit wastefulness and being a bit more frugal. But my inner best friend is also grateful to my inner critic because of all of this questioning. Like, don't you want a bigger home? Or don't you want a home that looks nicer? Why don't you want all of the things that we're supposed to want in life? So all of these questions do help me because they make me check in with myself and with hubby. And we talk about things like this, like, are you still happy in this neighborhood? Would you want more space, etc. So I do have regular check-ins with myself about topics such as these, and also with hubby because, of course, we live together and I want us both to be happy where we live. If I didn't have my inner critic, I might not question myself as much, which I think would make me more complacent. Interconnections was all right for me this time around. I didn't really feel anything too exciting about this exercise like I have in the past, but I did see all of the different ways that my home supports me. One of the main themes that came up for me in this exercise was how much I love being at home and also how well my home fits into what I want for my current lifestyle. The last section is reflect, and it contains 3 exercises, the first being pendulum redux. In this exercise, I really noticed a dichotomy between how external factors and internal factors affect how I feel about home. So external factors for me are things that I see in media or social media, conversations I have with people about the topic of home, and all of these tend to make me feel like there's something wrong with me because I live in a small home and because I enjoy living in a small home. I feel like I'm different and weird and just not normal. It's not a good feeling, and I think that's why my inner critic is so vocal and constantly questioning me. But then when I just kind of like tune everything out, when I'm just at home and by myself, I feel very happy and at peace with my tiny home. And I wrote a line that really does encapsulate how I feel right now, and that is that I love my small and sustainable life. This dichotomy, of course, makes me want to retreat into my internal bubble so I can just feel content and at peace and not have these external factors making me feel like I'm super weird for being who I am. But then I think about my inner critic music and how her questioning helps me. So I think the external noise also helps me to be more clear and more confident in my choices. I could have very easily just gone with the flow and upsized my home and done all of the things that we're supposed to do in life. But me sticking to my choice of living in a tiny home, it must mean that I love it, because it's hard to go against the grain and to constantly feel like you're different or that you need to explain your choices to the people around you. I'm going to talk about looking up, but rather than repeating myself when I do the summary, I'm just going to turn the page and show you the last spread, which I am so proud of. I love the way this turned out. In the treasures exercise, I pulled out the nuggets that I learned about myself throughout the course of this chapter. I think most of them I have already shared with you. The summary section is where I laid out what I learned about myself during the 3 times that I did the home reset. And I really like jotting down the statement from the looking up exercise as a way to recap what I learned about myself or what I was going through when I did each reset. I completed my first reset in June of 2021, and my looking up statement was, I see myself as someone who has a balanced home. Not too much stuff, but not too little, not too big, but not too small, a place for productivity and rest. During this reset, home became less associated with physical space for me and more about mental and emotional ease. My second reset I completed in December of 2022. And my looking up statement was, I see myself as someone who lives in a home that supports the person I am and wants to be. During this reset, I really noticed that my home is my source of power. It's contributed to my financial independence, and it enables me to live the lifestyle that I currently enjoy. The looking up statement for my third reset, which I just completed, is, I see myself as someone who remains unattached, even though I'm so grateful for my physical home. We already talked about the context for this looking up statement, so I won't go into detail here, but it's really important for me to love my home, but also remain unattached to it. I don't want to cling to my home in case something changes or in case I change. Overall, I really enjoyed this chapter and I gave it a light blue cloud because it was just so much fun and I feel really good about my home right now. Even though I do have that baseline of fear that something's going to happen to take me out of my contentment, but I'm glad that it came up, and now that I'm aware of it, I can work on changing that mental model. So even though I know I still will feel that fear and that worry, I don't need to let it affect me in the way that it has. That is going to be it for what I learned about myself during my home reset. I hope you enjoyed this video. I'm going to be starting the next chapter very soon, and that is going to be a tough one. It's going to be on relationships. So I will be back very soon with the intro video for that chapter. Until then, please take care and bye for now.